歡迎各位出席。
Welcome to the press conference on the new arrangement for selling Chinese New Year flowers. We have a Secretary for Food and Health, Professor Sophia Chan, Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene, Ms. Vivian Lau, and Mr. Lee Chi-kit of the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department. Professor Chan will first say a few words, and then the other two speakers will also say something later. First, the Secretary. Good evening. Together with the Director of the Food and Environmental Hygiene and Ms. Lee of the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department are here to talk to you about the new arrangement for selling flowers for Chinese New Year. Now, earlier on, because we have seen, the problem with we have seen the serious epidemic, so we decided to cancel the Lunar New Year fairs, and then we plan to discuss with the sector to see what arrangements could be put in place to help the florists, because they have spent a full year, planting flowers for the fairs. And also for the public, they would like to buy flowers for the Chinese New Year. So we need to make some arrangements. We've been in discussion with the sector to explore feasible options and minimize the impact as a result of the cancellation of the fairs. Of course, it is also important that we reduce the risk of transmission of disease in the phase of the epidemic. We need to protect public health. So in the past week, we've been in close discussion with the sectors. We understand that there are aspirations from the sector as well as the public about the buying of flowers for the Chinese New Year. And then we see that there's a resurgence of the epidemic in recent days. So while we try to address or respond to the aspirations of the community, we have to make sure that risk of transmission is controlled as there are sales activities. So having considered the matter carefully, while we try to prevent infection, we will substantially reduce the scale of the fairs, so we could minimize the risk of people gathering together. Now, to facilitate florists and the public, the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department, FEHD, will make arrangement for florists to sell flowers at the original 15 sites for the Lunar New Year fairs, but then the number of stores will be reduced by about half. Well, as I said, we have to bear in mind the priority of controlling the disease, but at the same time we have heard the views of florists. So we try to strike a balance between minimizing risk and responding to their demands. And so we have a series of new measures to be put in place so that there could be effective prevention and control of the disease. As I said, there will be a series of new measures. Firstly, we will be using technology to monitor the crowd in the fairs. It's important that we control the flow of people, because if we don't want too many people together. So we're going to make use of online information and media broadcasts to inform the public at the first instance of the latest situation, and then we will also be strictly enforcing prevention control measures. In a moment, Mr. Lee will explain to you how we're going to make use of technology to monitor the venues. Now, of course, apart from monitoring the flow of people at the venues, as I said, we're going to put in place the prevention control measures. At the same time, we need to manage the people working at the fairs. Now, for the store operators, they will be able to use the venue for free, but then they must still follow the rules, the venue rules, and also the prevention control measures. For example, there's need to take a body temperature before entering the venue, and then we will be providing hand sanitizers and so on. So this will be a requirement. Apart from venue rules and prevention control measures, we also have to consider people working at venues. We're talking about the store operators and the employees. Now, first, the store operators must provide a list of the staff on site and their contact information. If there is need to do contact tracing, then it will facilitate such effort. And then for the operators and the staff there, before the fair start operation, they must take a test, and they must have negative test result before they're allowed to work there. And of course, the test will be provided for free by the government. So these measures are to respond to the aspirations of the public, as well as to minimize infection. Now, we will be meeting with the relevant member of electrical and the sector on the latest arrangement. We'll be explaining these arrangements to them, and also we will be discussing with the sector the specific arrangement. And for store operators who are interested, we invite them to put in applications, and then we'll be drawing lots later. Maybe now I'll invite Mr. Lee of the EMSD to tell you about the monitoring system. Thank you.
Friends of the media, good afternoon. Now, each venue's entrance will have infrared monitoring equipment to take their body temperature when they enter the venues, and all our entrances and exits, we will be counting the traffic. We will be using infrared equipment to do a head count, and we will divide the number of attendants in 3 colors. We have red, yellow, and green. Green being having the least people in the venue, and we will be displaying the colors at the venue, and this information will be displayed on a dedicated website. It will be open information. At the same time, we welcome all participants to download our QR code, and these are the relevant IT measures we will have in place. So the app is Leave Home Safe, and they can download it. We can now take questions from the media. Please limit your questions to 3, and also identify your media outlet. From cable TV, the crowd control measures. How will you implement that? Because in past years, there are a lot of attendance at these flower fairs. So some members of the public, they want to go to the fair, but there's already crowd control in place. Does that mean they need to wait and queue outside the venue? But would that increase the risk of infection? So would that lead to more crowds? And on the drawing of lots, how will the lots be drawn? So the original stall operators, they had already tendered, and they should have their stalls allotted. Are you concerned that this would lead to criticisms of the mechanism not being fair? Well, I'll answer briefly, and my colleague from Food, Environmental Hygiene can supplement. Now, when we organize these events, now we have tried to strike a balance. We know that the public, they need to buy flowers for CNY, and we also know the farmers need a venue to sell their inventory. So given these conditions, we need to allow retail outlets to operate, and we have to implement crowd control. Now, just now Mr. Lee had described how we will exercise strict control on the number of entrants, and if we see large crowds congregating, we will control the attendance. There are also other measures in place. Of course, each venue, the size will be different. And just now, a reporter had said we have reduced the number of stalls to almost 50%. So the stalls will now be further apart, and FEHD will be designing the stall deployment and the distance between the different stalls, and also implement crowd control. Regarding the drawing of lots, I'll also have my colleague from FEHD supplement. Well, first of all, on crowd control, just now Mr. Lee said that we will be applying technology. So EMSD is helping out, and we will be deploying infrared sensors at the entrance and exit points. So depending on the size of the venue, we will divide the venues into different plots. So let's say, for example, Victoria Park, it's a larger area. So initially, we can divide Victoria Park into probably 4 smaller areas. Now, each area will have its individual crowd control facility. So by having smaller lots, we feel the crowd control work can be performed better. We will also be deploying IT to provide real-time information. Mr. Lee said that the situation in each venue, we will have a color-coded system to indicate the number of people. So if there are not a lot of people, it will display a green signal. If we have more people, it would be yellow. And then if the venue is at full capacity, it's near the maximum capacity, then we'll display a red light. So we will be updating these color codes on our website at a regular interval. So before the public go to these flower fairs, they can know in advance how what the situation is like. So if there are a lot of people at the venue, we have very strict crowd control measures. So we will have a waiting area. We'll ask them to wait, because we have people coming in and people leaving. They have purchased their flowers, they want to leave, and then we can allow new patrons into the venue. We'll also enforce social distancing. We want them to maintain an adequate distance. So that is part of our crowd control measure. But part of our crowd control measures. Now, there was another question about drawing lots. Last year, at the end of the year, we had an open tender exercise, and there were over 1,000 stalls available for tender in the whole of Hong Kong. But given the epidemic situation, we cannot accommodate that number of stalls anymore. And the original layout of these stalls, we cannot have it laid out as in previous years. So we do have some criteria that we need to meet. We want to be fair, so we feel that drawing lots is fair and open. Another principle we want to adhere to is a successful bid for a certain venue. The operator can go back to that venue. They don't need to switch to another venue. And we foresee that we will reduce the number of stalls by 50%. We hope that the successful bids, if they wish to go back to their venue, we would try to accommodate them to the best of our ability. So put simply, the successful bids, the stall operators, we hope they can get at least one stall back in their preferred venue. Now, other operators, they might have bid for a lot of stalls, so we will divide those lots in proportion. So if they're willing to come back to those venues, they can go back to the original bid venue. And if they had bid for a large number of stalls, they would be able to get more than one stall. And looking at it initially, we don't want it to be too complicated. So how are we going to deploy the ratios? It would be applicable in all 15 venues, and we see that each operators can be awarded 1 to 3 stalls per operator. And we had negotiated with the industry, and they all express their willingness to cooperate given the epidemic. The industry support our efforts. So, and we also need to thank them for their cooperation. We mentioned that we have epidemic measures. The industry supports us. Next, the lady in gray.
Questions from RTHK English News. First question on how would authorities lower the infection risk at the venue, no matter it's for the area where people will be waiting to get in, as well as certain popular stores where people will be crowding to buy flowers. Second question, some flower vendors have said that they have already made alternative sell arrangements so that they can sell their products after the authorities initially canceled the fairs. And some have already canceled their orders from the suppliers. So will this kind of U-turn from the government create more problems for these vendors? And will you apologize for the troubles caused? Why haven't authorities solved the potential problems and the demands from the flower vendors before they decided to cancel the whole event? Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, your last sentence I couldn't hear.
Why haven't the authorities thought of potential problems and the demands from the grievances from the flower vendors before they decided to cancel the event before? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll first of all, answer, and then perhaps then later on invite the director of the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department to also supplement. First of all, due to the epidemic situation, we have the government have earlier announced the cancellation of the Lunar New Year fairs. But at the same time, we also understand, even if we have decided to cancel this big event, which potentially would create a lot of people flow as well as a crowd within an area or in the park. But at the same time, we also reckon in our last press release that we are going to communicate with the flower farmers to see how best that we should move forward in order to reduce the inconvenience cost, to the farmers. And also we reckon that, the people in Hong Kong, because of the Lunar New Year, they would also like to buy New Year flowers as a cultural practices. So due to all these communication with the flower farmers, we have and also looking into the situation of the epidemic, confirmed cases, and so on. So we have also invited the Innovation and Technology Department to come together to think of solutions as to how we can, at the same time, organize the event, but we can also minimize the risk associated. So after careful consideration and also listening to the comments of the flower farmers, we have decided under a very controlled and also regulated, situation at the sites of running these Lunar New Year fairs. The 15 sites that we have identified, we have decided that with a huge reduction of the number of stalls, that is about 50%, that, and together with a series of new measures that we have identified, such as the information, innovation and technology surveillance system that Mr. Lee have just now introduced to actually monitor and also manage these crowds that is coming into the fairs. As well as very stringent measures of infection control measures within, the site, as well as on the people, that is the flower farmers as well as their staff. So as far as the site is concerned, obviously there is all these infection control measures such as taking temperature, controlling the crowd, as well as hand sanitizer, and also social distancing measures. For people, that is for the flower farmers as well as their staff, their employees, we have to test them. We do viral testing at least 2 days before, the start of the the Lunar New Year fair, as well as getting the list of their names and also contacts, so that just in case we need to have contact tracing, that we got a list of their situation. So we believe in all these new measures that we have identified, including the innovation and technological measures, plus other measures, and also plus the reduction of the number of stalls, that we believe that we have tried our best to lower the infection risk. Perhaps Director Vivian Lau can also supplement.
Yes, in making new arrangements for sale of New Year flowers, what comes to our mind is actually to do, crowd control as effectively as we can. So what we are proposing to do is, first of all, we will divide the relatively large venues into smaller enclosed areas for better admission control. And we will be making the best use of technology to assist footfall count and admission control, and update patronage data for dissemination over the web and on the radio to facilitate patrons to plan their visit. Actually, in consultation with the Center for Health Protection, we'll be setting a cap on the number of visitors inside each enclosed area, and then making known by way of an alert system to members of the public. So when the capacity is exceeded, there would be a red alert, so that people will know that the place is crowded for the time being, so better come later. So if they do come, and when they are not allowed to enter the enclosed area because the capacity has been exceeded, then members of the public will be queuing at a waiting area, a designated queuing area, a designated waiting area in the venue, with social distancing measures closely observed. Just like I said that we'll be making best use of technology, what I was referring actually are infrared sensors that will be installed at the entrance and exit of each individual enclosed area, so that the number of persons therein could be computed. And if the capacity is exceeded, as I said, an alert will be disseminated to the public on site, on a dedicated web page, and through radio, television as needed. So we'll be making the best endeavors to do what we can to do effective crowd management, and that would be the success of the the coming arrangements for sale of festive flowers in the run-up to the Lunar New Year.
Next, please. On the third row, in the dark gray jacket, the lady there. Yes, Secretary, in 10 days you made a U-turn. Now, about checking body temperature and doing tests, these are just basic measures. Did you need 10 days really to come up with such measures? How come you didn't talk to the flower farmers first before you canceled the fairs? Now, there are supposed to be over 1,000 stores. So have you talked to the store operators? What is their inclination? And what about operators who have, hired people to set up scaffolding or hired other venues because you canceled the fair? So would you be giving them compensation? Would you be apologizing to them? And now we see that there's the epidemic is the state of flux, and you are still extending the various social distancing measures. You disallow dining at night, and then you allow the fair to be staged. And so how can you convince the public that it's okay for them to go out to buy flowers but not to go to do other things? I'm from Apple Daily. Okay. Now I must stress that earlier on we cancelled the large-scale Lunar New Year fairs. If I recall correctly, it was on the 8th of January we issued a press release. We said that because we wanted to help flower farmers to sell their their festive flowers through other means, so we would be meeting with them. And then on the basis of effective prevention of the spread of disease, we will explore possibilities. So we said we have mentioned a series of measures, but we already said that we'll be exploring different possibilities. So it's not a U-turn. And then we have been talking to the flower farmers. They've offered various suggestions. So we try to, and we are heeding their views. It's not just the flower farmers want to sell the flowers. The public want to buy flowers too. So that's the first point. Second point is about the venues. Now they believe there's no need to add new venues because the original 15 venues are well known to the public. So that's why we are still staging the fairs at the original 15 sites. That's the second point. Third point, if we keep to these sites and we want to reduce the crowd size, that means we must reduce the number of stores, as the director explained just now. Okay, we are reducing the number of stores. It is still important that we control the crowd properly. Especially now we're seeing resurgence of the epidemic, and then also we need to maintain social distancing measures. That's our guiding principle now. And here we're talking about an annual event. It only happens once in a year, and everybody looks forward to it, both the farmers and the public. So look forward to that. And so we need to strike a balance. And now we have the support of the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department. They are using new technology, so that gives us confidence to reduce the risk or even minimize the risk. And with that in mind, and the actual director met with the farmers again today. She could tell you more about the meeting. Now, we're looking at the overall situation. Of course, we see that there's fluctuation in the epidemic. We have various measures to tackle the epidemic. But on the new arrangement for selling the festive flowers, we have a series of measures to deal with that. Of course, we mentioned the various measures, the social distancing measures and infection control measures. That includes doing tests for the workers there. And then we have a list of the workers to facilitate contact tracing, and we also have the Leave Home Safe app, and we have to discuss further with the sector about all these arrangements that initially they've expressed the willingness to comply, so they welcome these measures. Now, on the provision of the venues and so on, it will be for free. So now the director could tell you more. Thank you.
In our discussion with the industry, it has been ongoing. We met with them a few times last week. We all agree that the COVID situation is unpredictable. We're under severe challenges, and we're all have fighting the epidemic first and foremost on our minds. So we need to cooperate, and they are willing to cooperate. They agree to put fighting COVID ahead of everything else. So I have to thank the industry for their input. They can continue to operate their business. They can also facilitate the public with purchasing flowers, the number of stalls, the operating hours, the epidemic measures. All these have been negotiated, and I mentioned that in our flower fair we will also set aside cleansing hours, cleansing time slot. So after a few hours of operation, we will do cleaning, and they can call and they continue their sales. So they all agree that we need to put the epidemic first, and we will continue to communicate with the industry, and we want a win-win situation for all. So the farmers can sell their flowers, and the public can also purchase their products. We'll take two more questions. From Hong Kong 01, I'd like to ask, you said that the Secretary said that there's no U-turn, and the government said that they could forecast a rebound in the epidemic infection rate, but now we have a policy flip-flop, and do you think that the policies are not down to earth? And regarding Sam Sui Po, Prince Edward area, there are two flower fairs there. It's also near an outbreak area. Will you have special arrangements for those venues? And we don't have a lockdown yet, so how will you prevent infections in those two particular venues that I mentioned? And I also want to follow up on overall measures. Now, the government says that it will look into all options. Now, are you looking into lockdown, or are you looking into appointment for testing and such? Thank you for the question. As I said previously, on 8th of January, we decided to scrap the flower fair. These are major events, an annual event with a lot of crowds. So we were worried that having so many people congregate would lead to some problems. So why did we make an announcement that it would be scrapped, it would be cancelled? It was to give the flower farmers early warning. If they wanted to sell their products, they needed early advance warning. They would have to make earlier decisions. But after we canceled the flower fairs, our press release also said that we need to assist the flower farmers. We need to continue negotiations with them. They need to know that we had to cancel large events because of the epidemic, but we did not stop thinking about other arrangements such that it would be mutually acceptable. They could continue to sell their products. So how do we assist the flower farmers? We met with them. We wanted to explore feasible alternatives given the epidemic situation. So we had explored whether we could have a flower fair in each district. So last week we had spent 7 days with them. We collected their input, and we also made some planning, some decisions and arrangements. So here we're at this press conference to outline our decisions. So since our announcement on 8th of January, we have been in negotiation with the farmers. We made arrangements, and this is the final outcome that we're announcing today. Second, the second question was about details of crowd control. So I'll have the director elaborate. Now, your question on crowd control, whether we should have an appointment system, we had thought about it, but purchasing flowers, the public might not want to make an appointment over online appointment. So we decided to deploy IT to monitor the head count, the traffic flow in the venue. We decided to use a color code system, red, yellow, green, and this information would be uploaded on the website, and we'd also have TV, radio broadcasts. So the public, before they leave their homes, they need to check on this information, and when they arrive at the venue, we have a waiting area. So before the public go visit the flower fairs, they need to check the broadcasts and avoid crowds. So while they're at the flower fair, after they've made their purchases, they need to leave the venue as soon as possible, because given the epidemic situation, we feel that would be best practice. We need people to wear masks, to use hand sanitizers, we need to control crowds. All this will be implemented strictly. So through these various measures, we would like the public to be able to purchase their flowers in safety. Now, each venue, in Samsoipo, there are two venues, one in Fahoi, the other one is in Cheongsanwan Playground. So we are aware of the situation in these two venues. They are relatively open. They are not surrounded by residential buildings. So the Cheongsanwan Playground, it has an open area, and Fahoi, it's adjacent to Boundary Street. It's not surrounded by residential blocks. So we will keep an eye on the epidemic situation, and we will strengthen our measures. Last question.
The gentleman on the second row, please. I'm from the Oriental Daily. About the waiting area, would there be maximum capacity? And what if the capacity is reached, and how do you deal with other members of the public trying to come over? So how many people will be at the market, say at the Victoria Park Fair at any one time buying flowers? Now, after you cancel the fair, as you said, you will refund the farmers. Now, if they try to auction again or tender again for these, or auction again for these, a bid for these stores, then what would be the price? or fees? Well, perhaps I'll ask the director to tell you about the arrangement at the Victoria Park and the waiting area. And I mentioned earlier, on the provision of these venues, the fee is there won't be any fee. It will be free of charge. Director. Now, we said we would refund the store store operators, and we've actually completed the refunding exercise. On the waiting area, of course, I hope there's no need for us to use the waiting area. That's why we try to disseminate information. So this is to facilitate people getting into the fair to buy flowers. And if people have to wait, of course, it's not the best arrangement. But then, we know sometimes some people would rather wait. That's why we will we will arrange a waiting area. And in a waiting area, we will observe the full social distancing measures. That is, every person will be, will keep the necessary distance. And then for people who want to go to the fairs, please, we would like to appeal to them to take note of the real-time information about the crowd inside the venue. Please try to go to the fairs at a time when there is a smaller crowd, because everyone wants to observe all the prevention and control measures. For these festive flowers selling points, I hope everyone will go in quickly, buy what you need, and then leave. That would be the best thing, because then we could avoid having too many people gathering at the same place at the same time. So that's why we're trying to disseminate information on the crowd size, and hopefully we could achieve that objective. That's the end of the press briefing. Thank you.